Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca high schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 68,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools.
Hello and welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm Mark Sensini, a 1996 graduate of Cherokee High School, and today we'll be talking with a Shawnee graduate from the class of 2002. He's a full-time acoustic and electric bassist and educator. Joining us from his home in Brooklyn, New York, I'd like to welcome Christopher Tordini to the show. Chris, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
No problem. Glad to have you here. So before we get into your career as a professional musician, I want to go back and talk a little bit about your time in South Jersey. Were you born and raised here in South Jersey?
Actually, I was born in Montclair, New Jersey, more in the North Jersey area, and my family relocated to Medford when I was 2 years old, which would have been 1986.
Okay, so most of your time spent here in Medford. You have any siblings that went to Shawnee as well?
Yes, I have an older sister named Robin. Robin Tordini was her name. She's married now. Her last name is Pinto. Her husband is Mike Pinto, who actually also went to Shawnee. They were the same class. They graduated in 99.
So let's talk about your time at Shawnee. Any teachers that you remember that stood out to you when you were there?
Definitely. I would say the first one would be Doug Barber, who I believe recommended me to you guys for this show. That's why I'm here.
He did, that's right.
He was one of the first people I met at Shawnee because he was marching band director, and he was also my first electric bass teacher. The summer before I got to Shawnee, he started teaching me electric bass, and so he had a huge influence on me as a teacher. And he was always very encouraging throughout my whole time at Shawnee, showing me new kinds of music, a lot of jazz, a lot of other stuff. And just, he was a very encouraging figure in my life, and even after I graduated Shawnee as well.
And Jeff Loudon was another teacher that you mentioned?
Yeah, Jeff Loudon was another, he taught all different kinds of music courses at Shawnee when I was there, and he was another very encouraging teacher for me. He taught Music Theory 3, which is like the highest music theory course offered at Shawnee at the time. And before I was at that level even, he noticed that I was really interested in it, so he would, he gave me a couple books that I wouldn't have known about otherwise about music theory, and was always like showing me cool things that piqued my interest even more, and yeah, just very encouraging throughout my time at Shawnee as well.
Now, when did you really get into music and playing instruments? Was that in Shawnee or was that earlier than that?
I started to really get into music right before I got to Shawnee, and towards the end of middle school. I took piano lessons when I was a little kid. When I was around 8 years old, I started taking piano lessons, which gave me a good foundation about learning notes and scales and that kind of thing, but I was not interested really in it at that time. But then I had another teacher at Medford Memorial Middle School, Miss Cecil, was a music teacher there, who realized that I had an aptitude for music and that I was interested in it. And like 7th and 8th grade, she was very encouraging for me to explore that interest and learn more about music. So she never taught at Shawnee, but she was also big for me. And then, so around 13 or 14 years old, I started to really take it seriously and look at it as something I definitely wanted to pursue, music in some way as a career.
Excellent. And then you also mentioned Marcia Urgood, English teacher at Shawnee, who had an influence on you as well.
Yeah, I was trying to think about the teacher at Shawnee that had a big influence on me, that I learned a lot from, that was not music related at all. And Miss Urgood was one of my favorite teachers at Shawnee. I had her for English 3 out of the 4 years I was a student at Shawnee. The only year I didn't have her was my junior year. And I just always appreciated how she created an open dialogue with the students in the classroom. It was a very friendly environment. No one ever felt like they were asking a stupid question or had a stupid opinion. Like, everyone was talking openly about the books we were reading. So I learned a lot about literature and talking about books from being in her classes.
Excellent. Now let's talk about some of the activities you were involved in at Shawnee. I know marching band was a big one for you.
Yeah, marching band was. I did it all 4 years. I was at Shawnee, and um, it was interesting because before I was even a student at Shawnee, coming in like the summer before my freshman year, you start band camp in August. So I got to meet all the band directors and all the fellow students coming in my class and the upperclassmen as well before my first day of Shawnee as a student. So that kind of always colored my experience of Shawnee as being in the marching band because it was the first thing I did when I got there, and I made a lot of friends. And the first couple of years I was in marching band, I actually played the electric bass in the marching band, which is kind of ridiculous. It's not a marching band instrument, but
It
that
sounds
was
like it
kind
would be
of
very easy.
no, it wasn't easy. You know, it's funny because I wasn't gonna join the marching band, but my sister had done the color guard, and she had such a great time and made such good friends that my parents were like, "You should really try this." And I was like, "Fine, I'll only do it if I can play electric bass." And so Mr. Barber, who was the director at the time, let that happen for because he's a very nice man.
Right.
But then after 2 years of that, not really working out so well, I played in the drum line, so I got to play drums in the marching band, which was way more fun.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a lot more exciting. So you were also involved with jazz band
Mm-hmm.
and the orchestra, and you did some singing as well?
Yeah, I that singing is another thing that I've been doing since I was a little kid, like singing in church choirs and things like that. And I always really enjoyed it. So yeah, I was in Shawnee Singers when I got to Shawnee. That's where I met Jeff Loudon. He was the instructor at the time. Um, yeah, so I was in Shawnee Singers. I think 3 out of my 4 years, and yeah, I was in the jazz band. That was huge. I mean, I most of what I do now is jazz related or jazz adjacent. Most of the music that I do professionally. So I learned a lot from Mr. Barber and being in the jazz band and the orchestra too. I learned a lot. It's all great music experience for sure.
So you were playing the bass in the jazz band?
I was actually, I think I I'm having a hard time remembering now, but I think I might have played piano on some songs actually as well because I as I said, I took piano lessons, and I always was like, since I got serious about music, I went back to piano and started learning a lot of that too. I think I might have played piano a little bit in the jazz band too, but mostly bass.
Okay. When did you first start playing the bass? Was that in Shawnee or was that before?
That was I started playing the electric bass right before I got to Shawnee, learning from Doug Barber. He was primarily a trumpet player, but he also played electric bass, so he taught me that. And then I started playing the acoustic bass, the upright bass, around my junior year. There was one in the band room at Shawnee that I was messing around with, and I started to get more serious about it around my junior year.
And what were you playing in the orchestra and the wind ensemble?
That uh, that was another interesting one. I was playing the double bass, the acoustic bass, but also on if there was a piece of music that we were playing that required like extra percussion, I would like go like play percussion. Like I was kind of like a free agent, like
Okay.
whatever they needed me for, I would kind of cover.
So you were a valuable piece to that puzzle.
I'd like to think so, but I don't know.
It sounds like it. So let's talk about some of your special memories from Shawnee. Some trips with the jazz band?
Yeah, I don't remember what year it started, but every year in the winter time, there's like a high school jazz band festival at Berklee College of Music, and Doug Barber started an annual trip up there. You can enter your high school's jazz band in this like competition, and you basically play for judges, and you just hang out. And I have some good memories from those trips, like bonding with a lot of my friends and musicians, and it's kind of a fun thing to be staying in a hotel room away from your parents when you're like a high school student. It's a little
Right.
exciting, and I got to play music with and like hear other high school students play jazz from around the country. It was really cool.
And you had a couple of your own bands at the time as well, right? Outside of school?
Yeah, I started playing with a couple of the other people in the jazz band. We had a band. Kevin Coltree, who's a saxophone player, my year. Rob Prime was a guitar player, and a year younger than us, a drummer named Garrett Brown. And we started playing a lot as a band around my sophomore year. And we played a lot. We played gigs on the weekends and over the summertime. We were actually quite busy for like a high school jazz band. and that was really important for my development, like being in the band and developing material and playing a lot
Sure.
as a young man. And also, I was in a band called John Arbuckle that was a, a rock band with some of my other friends, two friends from Shawnee, Mark Calderero and Justin Ferrone, and two other kids that didn't go to Shawnee. And that was more of a rock band, and I actually played keyboard and piano in that band.
Okay.
And we won the Battle of the Bands my senior year of high school with
Wow.
John Arbuckle. That was really fun.
Probably one of your biggest memories from Shawnee, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, it was really fun. It was a really fun moment. You know, it's looking back on it. Of course, it's not like a big deal or anything, but it was just a really fun moment for us.
Yeah, when you're a kid in high school, that's a big thing back then, especially for a
Yeah,
musician. What kind of
yeah,
music
yeah.
were you listening to at the time?
Um, I was trying to listen to anything I could get my hands on just to learn whatever I could. A lot of jazz, like a lot of things that Mr. Barber, Doug Barber was showing me. Some classical music, a lot of rock. My friend Mark Calderero, who was in this band John Arbuckle, was always like, he was kind of like a hipster before the word hipster was as popular as it is now. He was
Right.
always like, "Oh, you don't know this band, you don't know that band." He was like showing me all these cool like indie bands that no one knew about. I was like, that was a good source of learning about music for me. It's just anything I can get my hands on, really.
Okay, so from Shawnee, you went on to college. You went to New School University in New York City. Tell us about that experience.
It was really kind of a culture shock to go from living in suburban New Jersey to living in downtown Manhattan all of a sudden and going to college. It was quite an adjustment, but as a student of I was a student of for jazz performance. That was my major, and
Okay.
if you're going to study that, there's not really a better place to be than there, because there's a bunch at the time. There was even more. That a lot of them have closed, unfortunately, but there's a lot of jazz venues in New York, and there was always amazing musicians playing, and a lot of them have good like student discounts, so you can go for kind of cheap and hear just some of the best music that you could hope for, and so it was a great environment for that. Um, and as far as like the school itself, it was a great school. Like a lot of the teachers there are like performers themselves that are really busy, you know, traveling and playing a lot. So they're not always there, but when they are there, you can learn a lot from them. And yeah, it was a good experience going there.
Now, a lot of people, when they think of going to college or going to school for music, they might think of the movie Whiplash. Was it as intense as that, or not quite?
No, I mean, I did enjoy the movie Whiplash, but as I'll tell you why I enjoyed it. It's because as someone that went to jazz school, watching Whiplash was like watching a really good comedy for me. Like it was totally like nothing like that at all in any way. I mean, there might be some music schools where it's like that, but
Sure.
at New School, there's nothing even close to that at
Well,
all.
well, that's good. Good.
Yeah.
So you built up some good relationships with your professors while at New School, and that helped you be able to play right out of college. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I started to, you know, become friends with a lot of my professors when I was a student at New School, and a couple times one of them would need a bass player for something, and I was getting a good reputation as a decent bass player, so they'd be like, "Hey, why don't can you play this gig with me?" And so I started just playing a couple gigs here and there with them. And by the time I graduated, I was playing fairly regularly with some of them, and I actually joined this is piano player named Andy Milne, who's from Canada, but he teaches at the New School, and I joined his band after I graduated college and recorded a record right away with them, and that was kind of like that feeling of like, you know, okay, I just graduated and I'm recording this album with one of my professors. That was a really good, like, yeah, maybe I can actually do this and do
Right.
it for a career.
So let's talk about your career now. So as a bassist, as far as the performance goes, are you doing a lot of studio work? Are you doing a lot of live stuff? Tell me about that.
It's really a mix of both of those things. A lot of touring at this point in my career. A lot of what I do is touring around the U.S. and around mostly in the U.S. and Europe with various different bands that I'm a part of. Like it's anything from like a band that I'm a member of, or somebody needs a bass player for a tour and they might call me for a more temporary thing.
Okay.
And also recordings. I mean, it's just kind of a lot of different things.
Is it typically jazz stuff you're doing, or are you doing rock or other types of music, or?
I'm not really in any rock bands at the moment. I have done that in the past, but at the moment, mostly what you would probably call jazz, or I end up playing a decent amount of music that's kind of like a crossover of like jazz and new classical music, quote unquote new music.
Okay.
There's like this genre bending thing going on in New York now with those two things. I play with a lot of people that are kind of in both of those worlds.
Okay.
And I also play with some singer-songwriters. I do a decent amount of that too.
So I was going to ask you about some of the celebrities that you might have worked with. Tell us about some of them.
I don't work with anyone that I would probably call a celebrity, but I do work with a man named Tyshawn Sorey, who is a percussionist and composer who just recently, this past year, won the MacArthur Genius Grant Award. It's like this really prestigious award. It comes with a very generous amount of money and also great acclaim. A lot of famous musicians and other artists and other people in other fields have won it. And so I would say that Tyshawn Sorey is probably the closest thing to a celebrity that I work with. But most of the people I work with probably would never be household names for most households.
Okay. I know you played all around the U.S. and you've played in Europe and Asia as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the coolest places that you've been to?
I've been to Taiwan a couple of times. I play sometimes with a pianist named Jo Yu Chen, who's from Taiwan. So she has booked us a couple of tours around the island of Taiwan in the past. That was really fun to be there. I've been to Iceland for the Reykjavik Jazz Festival. That was very beautiful. That's one of my favorite places I've been to. And I went to the Ukraine last year.
Excellent.
That was pretty wild.
Yeah, some different places you wouldn't normally think to go to.
Yeah.
What are some current projects you're working on?
Some current projects. Later this week, I'm going to Paris to play a concert with the saxophone player named Steve Lehman. He has a band called Celebayon, which is like a half American, half French based project. And we have a big concert in Paris this coming week.
How many people will you play to at something like that?
I don't know the venue that we're playing at, but I would guess probably somewhere between somewhere in like the 5 to 800 person range.
Okay.
I would guess.
Cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the other part of your career, the teaching aspect of it. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, I don't have any regular teaching at the moment, but I do get some students, some private students sometimes through the New School. At the New School, you can, if you're a student there, you can study with whoever you want, basically. So sometimes I'll get a private student for a semester through the New School, and I've done a fair amount of substitute teaching at the New School for classes at the New School and also at NYU. I have friends that teach there, and I've substitute taught for them sometimes. And I've done a lot of workshops and master classes. That's a big part of touring is you go somewhere and maybe there's a college and they hire you to come in when you're on tour to like give a master class to the students. And I've done a lot of that both with the band and also privately with just bass players. And I've done this around the US and also in Europe. There's this workshop in Siena, Italy, the Siena Jazz Workshop that I've taught at for the past 2 summers. It's a 2-week-long course, and it's a really beautiful place, and it's a really fun thing where you work with students both on your instrument and in like jazz combo settings, and you play with them and you meet them, and it's great.
That sounds awesome. Now, also as part of this, you've written a couple of books as well?
Yeah, I actually went to college with a person named Colin Bay, who is the grandson of a man named Mel Bay, and Mel Bay is like it's one of the biggest like music publishers, I would say, that like for instrumental instruction. Like there's a lot of like, you know, how to learn piano, how to learn this or that, and a lot of guitar books from Mel Bay. And he started working for that company after he graduated, and he reached out to a lot of his friends to write books for the company. So I was like, oh, okay. So I wrote this book called First Lessons Upright Bass, which is part of their First Lessons series. It's basically the first things you need to know when learning how to play the upright bass.
Okay.
That was really a tough book to write, actually, to like go back to, like, you know, you're not in the room with somebody, but you have to tell them how to like play the bass. It's kind of tough. And then that led to me writing another book for them called Killer Technique, which was not my choice for a name. It's a little bit cheesy, but it's basically, it's like, yeah, I know. It's basically like a little bit more advanced, like technique. So I got to be more creative and like develop some exercises to put in the book that are more personal that I've come up with on my own.
All right, so let's talk about your family now. You have your wife, Amanda. How did you guys meet?
She actually went to college with my older sister, Robin. They went to NYU together, and I met when they were roommates one year. So I actually met her when I was 17 or 18 years old, and we were friends since then. But then we started dating when I was 23 or 24. About 10 years ago, we started dating.
And you recently just had your first baby. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, my little girl, Susanna, she's just over 4 months old now.
And you have a cat as well with a rather unusual name.
Yeah, his name is Ibert. He's actually a cat that used to belong to a friend of mine. He was a stray. They picked him up off the street, and there was a litter of kittens, and he was the one that would come to them. And they named him Ibert because when he was a kitten, he had crossed eyes. And then, so it's like eyes, Ibert, that was the connection. His eyes are no longer crossed, but they're still big and kind of crazy. So yeah, it's a funny name, but we took him in when they had to move and couldn't take him with them. And he's my little buddy.
Well, Chris, congratulations on the new baby and a very successful career since graduating from Shawnee. And thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for having me. And that'll do it for this episode of Where Are They Now? For other Lenape District alumni interviews, check us out at youtube.com/Lenape District TV. See you next time.